While there have definitely been multiple controversial killers over the course of Dead by Daylight's history, whether that be old killer kits before they were reworked, or even modern killers who retain their current kits, none of them have been quite as controversial as the Legion.
Yep.
Even after countless changes and a partial rework, the Legion stands strong as one of the most hated killers in the game, for low tier survivors and high tier survivors alike, despite the fact the
This is another thing for perspective that I didn't have in the Scott video that maybe is worth talking about, is like, I didn't exist. Not that I didn't exist. Like, I'm clearly in my late 20s. I did not just suddenly exist. What I was saying is, like, I didn't start playing DBD until May of 2020, I believe. Which is like, so that would be, yeah, I didn't start playing DB till May of 2020. So Pyramid, I was in PTB. So I wasn't around for old Icky Legion. I was not around for old Icky Legion. So maybe what like Scott saying is like, I actually love facing Legion. Maybe it's like a, maybe it's like there's perspective there because of how bad they used to be, and kind of just feeling relieved it's not there anymore, perhaps. Because I didn't.
Legion is nowhere near as strong as many other killers in the game. So allow me to tell you about the killer so controversial that it actually unites the player base with almost universal hatred. Whatever your opinions are about the current iteration of the Legion, the original version actually played fairly differently to what you're used to nowadays. The Legion released all the way back in December of 2018 with the Darkness Among Us chapter, and right off the bat the Legion was already off to a bad start as the community was already feeling kind of let down from the day one release of the Legion. Not for any
Jeff came
balance reasons or issues with the kit,
got our
but
homie
because
Jeff.
the trailer for the Legion implied that the character would be something drastically different to what they actually ended up being in game.
Yeah, the Knight, as he exists now, is what Legion was initially thought to be. Like, the Knight, like, as he exists now, where he's placing down his extra posse, like his extra members, like his guards, that's what people thought that Legion was going to be. But, obviously that didn't happen. So it's kind of interesting. It's interesting that he, Knight got a power that was originally thought to be, you know, something that would be more fitting for someone else, you know? It's kind of weird, that perspective.
Game. You see, the trailer came out at a point in time where lots of people in the community were saying it would be really cool to have a killer that looks like a survivor, but then had the ability to switch it up and start attacking people, like an imposter survivor. And then boom, the Legion's trailer dropped and showed a survivor, David King, teamed up with another survivor, running away from danger to a safe spot, just for that survivor to then slip on a mask and gut David on the spot. While the trailer
now the problem with that though is, that 4-man Swifts just destroy that character then, right? Like for like a 4-man, they just tell you which one it is. Like they tell you who's real and who's not, right? So it kind of doesn't work in DBD, unfortunately. Like it's a cool idea, but it unfortunately just would not happen. Like the moment even like a 3-man, right? Like even like a 3-man could tell you like it's either the Claudette or it's the other one, you know, like even a 3-man would kind of blow up that character idea, even though it's cool. It just kind of doesn't actually work, unfortunately.
Didn't outright say it would be an imposter killer, there was no denying that it implied it heavily. So players felt somewhat ripped off when they logged on and saw that the Legion's playstyle was not like what they'd seen in the trailer. And then once people actually saw the Legion's ability, things only got worse. On release, the Legion's Frenzy mostly functioned in the same way it does nowadays, where you start sprinting, vault pallets, deep wound survivors, get the killer instinct proc, etc. Which already had some survivor players mad because the Legion would be able to injure survivors for free with zero counterplay. Loop a pallet, Legion will chase you around it with increased movement speed, backstep the stun, and then just vault over, then deep wound you. Loop a window, same thing, Legion can fast vault the window and deep wound you. Go for the W key strat, which counters most killers nowadays. Once again, the increased movement speed of a frenzying Legion would make short work of it. Since the Legion can apply this deep wound so easily and so quickly, there's zero point in healing, as you'd be wasting lots of time just for the Legion to deep wound you again instantly. For killer players, however, the initial impression was that the Legion's ability was actually really fun to use. Everyone loves going fast, and the ability to vault pallets as killer was new and cool, and vaulting through windows nearly as quickly as survivors was a blast too. How quickly you could apply deep wounds and therefore injure survivors was initially extremely exciting. But all of these positive feelings wore off quickly once players saw the gameplay after the Legion had injured people, as back then the ability would decrease the deep wound timer by a chunk each each time the survivor was hit by a feral slash. So what the Legion could do is find a survivor at full health, deep wound them, slash them again, which reduces their deep wound timer and then puts the Legion into fatigue. Then they'd wait for the ability to recharge, slash them again, rinse and repeat until the survivor was downed. Base kit, it would take 4 or 5 hits to down a survivor, with certain add-ons decreasing the amount of hits needed.
Yeah.
What this meant was that the zero counterplay frenzy bot playstyle wasn't just limited to injuring survivors, but fully downing them too. As you can imagine, survivor players were not happy about this, as it led to boring, repetitive, linear gameplay where it was only a matter of time before the survivor went down, as the Legion's ability nullified every core gameplay mechanic survivors had.
Which I find very interesting now, because like, you know, we talk about how like, you know, there's a grain of truth in everything. A lot of survivors are quitting the game right now. How is this dissimilar to like, say like obviously not to the same extremity that this is, but like Trickster or like the Knight, right? Or like the Artist, where it's just kind of like the hit is a foregone conclusion for both health states, right? The hit's just kind of a foregone conclusion on both health states, and it's just about how long you last and not necessarily will you get out of the chase. How much of that is like this thing that was like revered, or like not revered, the opposite, like detested and like, you know, universally seen as so, kind of like, you know, something that's kind of like in the game pretty commonly now, which is interesting. At least not to the same extent, but like, you know, is also in the game. Do people be done? Yeah, if like 7 Blink Nurse came out like today, oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, people would not play the game. People would 100% not play the game.
The thing is, killer players weren't happy about this either. While on paper, an ability that lets you get guaranteed downs on survivors for free sounds amazing, in actuality, even with this ability, the Legion was still a ridiculously weak killer. How could guaranteed free kills be weak, you may ask? The answer is time. This whole time,
this is why Knight and Trickster aren't good killers despite them having a really, really good chase. It's because just because you're good in the 1v1, it doesn't matter if you're not good in the 4v1. It doesn't matter if the hits are guaranteed, if they take forever, because time in DBD is gen time. I will say this till I'm dead. Time in DBD is gen time. Time you are not on a survivor is a time that they're on a gen somewhere. And if it takes you forever to get that down, it doesn't matter if the down's guaranteed. That's gen time that's happening. So it doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter.
Slashing a deep wounded survivor instantly ended the ability and put the Legion into fatigue and their ability on cooldown. So for each of these hits, outside of the first initial one, the Legion would have to be fatigued, which significantly decreases their movement speed, then they'd have to wait for their ability to cool down, then they'd have to hit again, rinse and repeat several times, which was a serious time sink. Even with the most powerful add-on combo at the time, Frank's Mixtape and Stab Wound Study, which both reduced the amount of hits needed to down a survivor with Feral Frenzy, it was still far too time consuming. This whole time, other survivors would be working on gens. Sure, you might have applied deep wounds to multiple survivors before committing to one, but the time you wasted chasing someone far outweighed the time they spent mending. Which meant, even with guaranteed downs, these downs took so long to achieve that the killer would still lose. Well, you could just Feral Frenzy to get the initial injury and then hit them a second time without your ability for a faster kill, right? Wrong. The Legion was 110% movement speed back then, the same as Huntress, Trickster, Deathslinger, all the slow killers, which meant they were considerably slower than most traditional killers and would be hit even harder by looping. While all the other slow killers had abilities that would help them deal with loops and secure hits, if you opted to go for the regular hit instead of Feral Frenzy as Legion, you'd be playing a slow killer with no ability. To put it simply,
it's either do the deep wound stuff or do that.
Survivors would play a mind-numbingly boring game of 5 hits before death with nothing they could do about it, and killers would still lose despite this. But then, players found a way to exploit the deep wound mechanic. Originally, the deep wounds timer would only naturally decay whenever the survivor wasn't in a chase with the killer. This was to ensure that survivors felt pressured to mend themselves but wouldn't just drop dead randomly in the middle of a chase. But we all know that the chase mechanic has never been perfect, and even when the chase didn't bug out by—
Do you know how often I'll end up like right behind a survivor and chase won't start? I'll be like this close to them. Like this close and the chase won't start. And I don't know why. I do not know why. I would fear I would fear Old Legion. I would fear Old Legion in the current game because I'll be like right on top of somebody, like this close. I'm not even excited. I'll be this close and chase won't start. It's just dumb.
itself, Legion players realized that if the survivor remained out of their field of vision for long enough, the game wouldn't register them as being in a chase even when they were. So Legion players developed a new strategy: apply deep wounds, hit them again to decrease the timer and go into fatigue, then simply chase the survivor while walking backwards.
Thanks so much for the
After a while, the survivor would have to either stand still and mend, making them a sitting duck, or keep running and drop to the floor. While it still wasn't particularly quick killing a survivor like this, it was a hell of a lot faster than hitting
sprinting.
them 5
they are
times
sprinting.
And taking
they are sprinting when I do that,
stun
Steve.
after stun. Things needed to change. So, 5 months later, in May of 2019, in patch 2.7.0, the Legion received a partial rework. Nerf: reduced Feral Frenzy's movement speed. Nerf: subsequent Feral Slash hits no longer reduce the deep wound timer. Nerf: decreased Feral Frenzy's vault speed on both windows and pallets. Nerf: increased the fatigue duration from 3 seconds to 4 seconds. Nerf: increased the killer's terror radius from 24 to 32 meters. Nerf: the deep wound timer will
Why would Legion ever need a shorter terror radius? For what reason would this killer ever need a shorter terror radius? That was a thing? Why? It's like Wesker just randomly having a giant terror radius. Like, for what reason? Because they're short? I don't think that matters that much. Already had 16? Hello? Yo, who's that? You just got here and you're gifting us up to the community? That's especially generous of you, friend. Thank you so much. That's way, way kind. Thank you for gifting that. It went to Jordan, too. Let's go. That's so sweet of you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Because they're 110? I guess. That's weird, though. But at least Pig's a stealth killer, you know? That makes sense. Like, she's a stealth killer, right? She's supposed to be stealthing around. Legion's never been a stealth killer. That's so weird to me. So weird. Or like you in the community? Oh, I appreciate that, friend. That's so mega kind. Oh, and the Gypster giving off the sub as well. To Delinquent, let's go! The Cloud Maid! Let's go, thank you. You guys are too kind to me. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. That's very, very sweet. I appreciate the both of you. Thank you. But yeah, it's that's strange. That's weird. That's weird that they were stealthy at one point. That's odd. Very, very odd.
Pause whenever in the killer's terror radius. Buff: the Legion's movement speed is now 115%. Buff: increased Feral Frenzy's duration from 6 seconds to 10 seconds. Alongside a list of other, slightly smaller changes. As you might have noticed, there were way more nerfs than buffs in this partial rework, which were fully intentional, as it was an absolutely miserable experience for survivors playing against the Legion, and it turns out that these changes were just a temporary solution to reduce the frustration factor of this killer while they worked on a real rework, which would take more time. On the plus side, the increased base movement speed did make the killer feel slightly nicer to play as, and paired with the removal of the ability to keep stabbing over and over, it paved the way for the modern day playstyle of Legion that we're all used to, which is deep wound someone, and if anyone else is close, then deep wound everyone nearby, and then when you commit to a chase with a survivor, it gets played out like a normal mouse 1 killer.
See, that's what I liked about like I don't know, that's why the funny thing about like whenever like the DC penalty is like turned off is you start to see the community's true feelings about the state of the game, because they just DC it against things that they hate and think are bad for the game. So it kind of like, it speaks a lot to like, you know, things that should be changed or should be looked at based on when you turn off the DC penalty and see who DCs against what. Like killers DCing against certain builds or survivors DCing against certain killers. Like it says a lot about the state of the game once people are just like, I can just leave for free. You know, it just shows you what things probably need to be looked at.
While yes, it is still a ridiculously poor design, with the pro of every survivor always being injured, but the downside of once they're injured, you have no real way of earning that second hit if the survivor can loop well, it's at least a step up from the original design, and the removal of walking backwards to break the deep wounds timer was a very important fix. Alongside all the issues that these changes didn't fix, they also brought a new issue to the table. The Legion was now ungodly weak, even more so than before. Like, it wasn't even funny. This killer needed some serious help. While yes, once again it's nice having all survivors injured 24/7, it's not really worth much when the ability doesn't help you earn the killing blow. If a survivor's injured, the Legion pretty much didn't have an ability anymore. So 7 months later in December of 2019...
That's how I feel with the Knight. That's how I feel with the Knight. I feel that's one of the big problems with the Knight right now, is of like... If the survivor just knows to shift W, I essentially lose my ability. Right? Like if the killer or the survivor just knows to W key away from me, I lose my power. I'm a 115 Andy with a sword. I think that's one of the things that makes him feel bad. Is if they just know the counterplay to the guards, you really do just kind of end up man with sword. And anytime you have a killer that ends up just essentially not having a power, they feel bad.
The Legion got some small buffs. Buff, increased Feral Frenzy's movement speed. Buff, increased Feral Frenzy's vault speed on both windows and pallets. Nerf, Feral Slash is no longer considered a basic attack.
Gross.
These were mostly just quality of life changes to make the Legion feel smoother to play, and this is most likely the iteration of the Legion you are all used to. But this iteration of the Legion is after all the changes to make them less frustrating to play against. So why does everyone still hate them? The answer is a combination of deep wounds and hit and run. While deep wounds can no longer be exploited like they used to, they're still such a boring mechanic to deal with. Mending the deep wounds just means standing still for 12 seconds and watching a bar fill up. While 12 seconds isn't too bad, it adds up very fast with how quickly the Legion can get around the map and how unavoidable the Feral Slash is. Over the course of an entire match, survivors could end up spending several minutes sat there mending, and there's not even skill checks for it, so you literally just end up holding down one button. Mending a deep wound isn't even so bad at the end of a chase. You've had a bit of fun and had the chance to run around with the killer for a bit, and now the killer's left you, you mend up while you recover from the fun. But it just becomes ungodly boring when the killer is trying to go for a hit and run playstyle and just deep wounds you over and over and over again without ever actually committing to a chase with you. The worst part about the hit and run playstyle is that it's not even an effective playstyle, and so many people don't even realize it. Even on the Legion, whose whole ability is perfectly geared towards this playstyle. It's not even an opinion, it's literally just maths. The thought behind hit and run with Legion is look at all the time they're spending mending. That's time where they're not doing gens, so more pressure for me. And while yes, that's absolutely true, if they're mending, they're not doing gens. But what are you doing while they're sat there mending? Running all the way across the map, chasing down the killer instinct procs before eventually getting fatigued, before finally eventually starting a real chase with a survivor. The killer ends up spending 30 plus seconds traversing across the map trying to apply deep wounds to everyone. Meanwhile, the survivors can undo all that work in 12 seconds.
Yeah, that's a problem a lot of killers in this game have. I would argue, like, you know, even the Knight has that to some extent, because when somebody does shift W key against you, it's just you and the guard running them down, right? You know, it's just like there's so much downtime where you're not doing something, you know? It affects things poorly. Which three kills are most fun? Most fun? Huntress, Hillbilly, and... fun? Honestly... after that, Huntress, Hillbilly are my favorites. They make me really happy, but... after that? I think there's so many characters... like, those are my top two, and everybody else is kind of middling. Probably, like, Deathslinger, honestly. Basically, anybody I can do a precision shot with. Anybody I can do, like, an attack that's like a tech or something that's really hard to pull off. I usually like those killers. DN, what about your mom?
Unless the survivors are all grouped up together, which they should never be, especially against the Legion, the killer just ends up wasting more time than the survivors do when mending.
Wesker's fun for one side.
The killer is slowing down gens, but they're also slowing down their killing and pressure more than that.
Because that's a big thing for me. That's why I don't find Wesker that fun. Because what the other side can do in response to me is also interesting and something that appeals to me in the game. A lot of Wesker's chases are foregone conclusions, so they're boring to me. They're boring. Like, I do like gliding at like, flying at people. It's super fun. And getting those, like, clutch hits. But, like, so many of those are, like, in a sense, guaranteed. And if, I like the counterplay people can apply to me. Like, and that's just as interesting to me as, like, playing the character themselves. I've had as much fun with a survivor who's mind gaming me as I have my hatchet held up. And I just barely get the hit. As opposed to like Wesker, where I know I have a giant hitbox, and if I miss even slightly, I'm still gonna get the hit. You know, like it's a little bit less exciting for me. You know, knowing that I have a little bit more a guarantee there, I guess would be the word. So that's why I prefer like Huntress and like Hillbilly over somebody like Wesker, or even Blight, for example. Just because like I know that like there's no fear of failure So I'm just too cozy. You know what I'm saying? I'm too cozy.
It's just lose-lose, and I really hope people wake up and realize this playstyle is ruining the game for everyone, including themselves. This whole time, the Legion remained in the dirt.
Demo is like middle of, like, Demo is probably the most balanced killer in the game, in my opinion. Demo is like the perfectly balanced killer. He's literally like the middle of the pack. He's got anti-chase, but it's not too strong. He has portals, which has, you know, map mobility, but he has to set them up. Like, he's literally like the perfectly designed killer. He is the median.
While they were less frustrating than they were originally, they were still frustrating. On top of that, balance-wise, the Legion was incredibly low tier. Everyone waited patiently for the real Legion rework we were promised, as the community understood that the dev team was already busy with new killer releases and reworks to other killers, until finally, 16 months later, in April of 2022, patch 5.7.0 released, with some juicy changes for the Legion. What were they?
Yeah, Demo's fun. He's really fun.
Each chained hit of Feral Slash
but he is
increased
like,
the movement speed of Feral Frenzy by
balanced.
0.2 meters per second, which stacked until the ability ends. Buff. After 4 chained slashes, the next slash insta-downs. Buff. Reduced the fatigue duration from 4 seconds.
That was the biggest thing that Legion mains wanted forever, was the base kit fatigue reduction. Because you used to have to run an add-on to do it. But that was like their biggest, like, no matter what they do in the rework, please give reduced fatigue. And they got it. But that was like what everybody wanted, was reduced fatigue.
3 seconds. Add-on pass. Most add-ons are buffed or receive new effects, which is the current version of the Legion at the time of making this video. While the addition of increased movement speed per chain hit definitely synergizes with the insta-down on the 5th slash, alongside making hit and run slightly less of a
which is ridiculous,
time, still not enough to make it strong though. The Legion suffers from the same issues as before. Any survivors who are medium skill tier or above are simply going to spread out and completely nullify the insta-down mechanic, and the hit and run playstyle still has the same problems it always had. But that's not even a rework, that's just buffs and nerfs. Where's the rework we were promised all those years ago? Well, due to the stats showing that the Legion was in a healthy place, Behavior decided not to bother with the reworks somewhere down the line and not tell us until somewhat recently. But here's what's even crazier. If the stats show the Legion to be in a healthy spot, which is roughly a 50% kill rate, that must mean in reality they're in a ridiculously weak state. Because what happens in actual gameplay is, in the majority of Legion matches, survivors either quit the game, outright sacrifice themselves on first hook, or just intentionally stand there to let the killer kill them quickly. All of this out of sheer boredom. So
I think this is a thing with so many killers right now, not just Legion, so I don't think you can necessarily use that as like a Legion-centric problem, but just kind of like a killers in general, like state of the game problem. Because people are doing this like crazy right now in general, not just with Legion. Not just a him thing.
With survivors regularly giving up against the Legion stats are still only showing up as mid. So imagine what their stats would be if survivors actually stuck through the boring matches and won. Imagine how low their stats would be. Can the Legion's current ability ever be healthy for the game? Are there numbers or conditions that can be tweaked to make them both fun and decently strong? Or is a real rework absolutely required? Let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed the video and thank you so much for sticking to the end.
I think Legion's relatively in a good place right now, right? I think Legion's balanced. I just don't think they're fun. I don't think they're interesting. Like, both to play as and against. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like Legion is... Like, they're like mid-B, right? Like, they're in a good spot, strength-wise. But, like... They're just not interesting. I never saw Legions, like, especially, like, like their post-rework, where they got the 5th hit and all the base kit changes, like the 5th hit and all the base kit changes, like, I feel like they're in a good spot. They're just not interesting, which is a different conversation, right? Like, I feel like it's a different conversation. Like Arditha said, that's more something that would have to be like, that's something that would have to like change in a full rework. I don't think their power is interesting. I think it's very like brain off on both sides. It's not very interactive. It's not very interactive. It's very meh. One is Never Sleep Pills. It's the one where your base movement in Frenzy, but your duration's really long. So like you basically buy more time to get hits. I think Freddy should have a work. Oh, definitely. Freddy has been in a terrible spot the entire time he's been in the game. Freddy has never, ever truly had a good adaptation, in my opinion, ever in the game's history. Freddy is the most, like botched character in the history of Dead by Daylight. Freddy's had 2 reworks. One that completely changed his power, and another one that, like, undid, like, his add-ons and, like, the way he played, but retained most of his power. I feel like Legion is in a good spot strength-wise, but they're just not interesting to play as and against. With Legion, like, there's not a whole lot of text to really learn. You're just kind of like, I run at you, I stab, I run at you, and I stab. And then you have a normal chase. And then the survivors obviously don't like sitting there mending and just hanging out, right? And the guy who gets hit with the 5th down, obviously, he didn't really get counterplayed. He just kind of got bopped, right? There's something to be said, like Scott said in his video, about people being grouped up with that or not 99ing their mend. But, you know, in solo queue, in duos, like, you can't really control that too much, right? So it's like, I don't know. It's like, it's more of a fun factor than anything. I feel like Legion's strongest thing is their aesthetic, right? Because, like, their power doesn't really do it. Their music's great too, you know, but I guess that's part of the aesthetic. But yeah, I do love dying to Legion because my teammates are bad. Yep. Yeah. So I feel like Legion is in a good place power-wise, but in terms of, like, intrigue and actually, like, interest, I think they could definitely be made to be a lot more, like, fun to play as and against. Dope skins? Yeah, they're the skin farm. That sounds like something out of a horror movie. They're skin farm. They're a skin farm, but, like, look. Let's go. Let's go. Let's take a gander at good old Legion. 87 skins. Does anybody have more on Killer? He has the most skins on Killer. 87. 87 cosmetics. 87 cosmetics. Wow. The Fang of Killer, literally. 87. Show all items. They have so much stuff. You guys are right. Literally, it's like, it's the Fang of Killer. Look at all that. That's crazy, dude. That's so much. And that's only, like, what I have to buy. I own a lot of this. That's crazy. That's a lot, man. 200 split, true, but, like, was that designed on purpose to also give them more costumes, right? You know? Was that also designed that way on purpose to give them more cosmetics? Perhaps that was on purpose. And then again, that's an entirely subjective thing, right? Like, there's plenty of Legion mains that absolutely adore this character and, you know, think they're the most fun thing on the planet. There's tons of survivors like Scott, I guess, who's like, I love current Legion. Dude, that was more phrased as like a, you know, I'm glad he's not, they're not artists, you know, which is, I feel like, a different conversation. You know, that's fine. It's fine. It's not that big of a deal.